Independent Writer Podcast, Episode 6, Basic Story Structure. Welcome back to the Independent Writer Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Medina. I'd like to remind you to visit our website, independentwriterpodcast.com, and our Twitter and Instagram is IndieWriterPod, and you can also find us on Patreon if you'd like to support the show. Today we're going to be talking about basic story structure. Basic story structure. So we're going to talk about what is story structure, what the crucial elements of a story are. We're going to also talk about the SWBST strategy for developing your story structure. And then we're going to go over one of the basic plot structures, pretty fundamental in almost every story with slight variations based on the type of story you're telling. What is story structure? Well, in story structure, a reader sees the way the content and events of your story are organized into a cohesive plot. The structure controls the major elements of the story, including plot, character, setting, and theme. We're going to go over some of these elements here in a minute and talk about how you piece all of these different elements together into making a complete story that a reader can follow and develop an understanding of what you're trying to tell them through the different parts of your story structure. And that's what builds the intensity and helps the reader enjoy the story and enjoy what you're trying to tell them. All right, let's move on to the crucial story elements. First, we have the setting. The setting is the world that your story is set in. It could be today that your story is set. It could be in the past at a certain point in time, maybe during the Civil War, maybe during the Old West, maybe during any time, the Victorian era. It really depends on you and your story. And then the next element would be your characters. And this is going to be your protagonist, antagonist, and all the other supporting cast in your story. And we talked about in the last podcast about what protagonist and antagonists do in a story and what their role is. And we'll dig into that deeper in the future. And then once you have your characters, the next thing you need is your inciting incident. This is going to be what triggers the story to happen. Up until that point, it's the normal world for your characters. And then one particular thing happens and the story starts. And that's the inciting incident. That's what's going to change in your character's world to make them have to venture into this new world that you're going to tell about. And then the last part of it is the theme. This is the moral of your story. It's what your protagonist must learn throughout the course of the story. Until they learn the theme, they can't overcome whatever issue they're dealing with from the inciting incident. They may have to decide that they can't be a loner, that they need to love others to conquer whatever has happened to them, that being a loner isn't what is going to make them happy in this world. So that's going to be your theme. That's going to be the overall lesson that your character has to learn through the journey of the story. Okay, now that we've covered the 4 crucial elements of the story, we're going to talk about a strategy for developing some of these things. And it can be daunting to try to figure out what all these different things are. You get all these terms and all these elements and you're not sure about it. So what the SWBST strategy does is it gives you a list of questions that you can answer and helps you build the foundation to grow your story into something more than it actually was. The first part of the SWBST strategy is somebody. Who is the main character? And this will become a big part of developing your story is you need to develop who your main character is. Who is this person? What about them makes them unique to your world? You need to know the major things in their life. You don't have to know every little detail, but knowing who your main character is going to be and what they want to be in life. Who is this person that makes them the hero of your story? They have to have some special qualities. And maybe being average and ordinary nobody is their quality. And the story is about them becoming somebody else by the end of the story. That's what they have to grow through this inciting incident. Decide who your story is going to be about and then start to build it from there. Next is wanted. And wanted is what does this character want, which I kind of alluded to before, is who is your main character? Well, what do they want out of life? If they're a lonely nobody, maybe they want friends, maybe they want a boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe they want a good job, maybe they want to get out of the town they live in. Whatever this want is this want to change is what drives them. And then again, it can also be a want not to change. Maybe they're happy with who they are, even though that's a terrible person. So, not wanting to be anybody but who they are could be the challenge that they have to face. And that's going to be their growth, is stop being who they are. It can work both ways. It's what they want out of life. Just because a character has everything they want in life doesn't mean that they're happy or that they can't change. That's what you're going to build into your story. And that gets to the next thing, is the but. But is, what is the problem or conflict? There's always a but. Like I said, they could be happy and have the perfect life, but they don't have any genuine friends. They don't have what they really want out of life. So that makes it difficult for them. Or it could be they're poor, they don't have money, they really want to go to college and become a doctor, but they don't have any of the things necessary to make that happen. And that's how you develop your conflict, is how they're going to get from their status quo of their mundane life to the adventure world where they're changing. And adventure doesn't mean they have to go on a big adventure. The adventure could be going to college and learning to become a doctor. It's all about going from the ordinary to the extraordinary and explaining how that affects your character's life and the people that either help or stand in the way of them achieving their goals. If they're going to go to college, maybe they meet a professor that hates them and does everything in their power to impede their progress. And having to overcome the challenges of that professor is what helps them become the hero of the story, that helps them earn who they should really be. That's the theme, is learning to stand up for yourself, and you see how these all build upon each other. Is once you have a theme, and then now you know who your character is, what they want, but what is their problem, and then that leads to the next step of the strategy, the S, which is how does this problem get solved? So how do you solve this problem? What is the character going to do? And that's going to be, the middle of your story is your characters trying and maybe succeeding, maybe failing, maybe a little bit of both. It could be a draw, they don't really fail, they don't really succeed, but they make progress. And that's the middle of your story, is your character learning to become who they want to be. That's them challenging the want in their life. They have obstacles. You're going to have to create obstacles for them. And that's what makes a reader want to continue to read your story, is that they see that there's challenges and they want to know how your character is going to confront each challenge. And you have to really make them tough and make your character struggle, because that's what's entertaining. That's real life. If they defeat every challenge without any problem, then that's not fun. I mean, if you think about it in the Harry Potter world, he has successes, he has failures. Even in the failures, he's learning things, he's growing, he's becoming better. And that's how you make your characters interesting. That's how you make your world alive. That's how you make them three-dimensional and not get lost in that world. And then once you figure out how you solve that problem, the last part of the strategy is the T, is the then. What's the result or outcome? And that's what you're driving for. Now that your character knows what they want, they have to overcome the conflict. They have to figure out how to solve it. What happens after they solve it? It could be good, could be bad. It really depends on what kind of story you're telling. They could solve the problem, save the world, be happy, everybody lives happily ever after. Or maybe they conquer the problem, but it really doesn't fix the world. It's just, it stopped something bad from happening. A lot of times that happens when you have like a series that, while the hero wins out in the end, it doesn't actually end the story, so to speak. You have to keep following the story. And that's kind of like Harry Potter is in each book, he conquers the individual challenge of the novel, but not until the end of book 7 does he actually beat Voldemort. Each series of years of school, he's getting the tools that he needs to get to the end of year 7 of the books to beat Voldemort. He needs to take that journey through each one. So each book is him growing as a character. And so you have to have the building blocks. If Harry had beat Voldemort in the first book as a whatever he was, 10, 12 years old, it really wouldn't be believable. Here's a super powerful wizard and here's this little kid beating him. It doesn't seem believable. But by the end, after everything he's been through, it's more believable that he's gone through the journey. And that's really what story structure is it's about building your character's journey and showing them grow, showing them succeeding at things, failing at things, making mistakes, but not letting the mistakes tear them down. And at times the mistakes will tear them down. And that's a good part to explore is how do they deal with failure? And maybe overcoming past failures is what helps them learn the theme of the story. It all works together to build a cohesive story that makes you love, hate, and the characters endure, because you don't want your characters to always be successful. You don't want them to always fail. You need to have ups and downs with them. And because in the end, if you want them to succeed, when they finally do succeed in the major goal, you really feel it. And that's what you're trying to get to, is you want your characters to really feel that they overcame it. So just to go over this again with the SWBST strategy, you have somebody who is your character, a want. What is it that they want out of life or the world? A but, they're going to need a problem of conflict. They're going to need a so of how do they solve the problem? And then what is the result or outcome of whatever the problem was that they needed to conquer? So that gives you a good short strategy of how to conquer that. And if you go to my website, I'll have a worksheet you can download to work with the SWBST strategy. That's easy for me to say. And then you can work with it onto your story. The last thing that we're going to cover in this podcast is the basic plot structure called Freytag's Pyramid. I mean, it really does. If you see a picture of it, if you Google Freytag's Pyramid, you'll get 1,000 pictures of it, and you'll see it kind of looks, it's basically just a triangle, looks like the side of a pyramid. And it really is how a story structure should go. What you have is at the bottom left leg of the pyramid, you have the beginning or exposition. This is your character's normal world. You're going to explain what it is about their life. Again, using Harry Potter as example, at the beginning of his story, he's a boy who lives in a cupboard under the stairs. He has abusive family that he lives with. He's not happy. He really doesn't have much, but he wants more out of life. So the rising action is he gets his Hogwarts letter. His family tries to prevent him from going up until Hagrid rescues him and takes him to Hogwarts. And then it goes up from there as he lives through his Hogwarts experience. You know, the middle of the story is him learning about the magical world and everything that's going into it till it climaxes with whatever if you're talking the Sorcerer's Stone, you're going to talk about the climax of him getting the stone at the end and all the challenges that him, Ron, and Hermione have to go through. He's making new friends. He's navigating the world of school as well as the overall big picture of having to save the stone. So there's a lot of major and micro things going on in his world and having to deal with, things like Malfoy putting obstacles in his way. He's learning Quidditch, and what he's learning in Quidditch becomes crucial to the end of the story. And as he goes through his year of the school, all the things he learns in that year, by the end between him, Ron, and Hermione, become the tools that gets him to the climax. Then after the climax, you have falling action, and that's, if you think of the climax as the point of the pyramid, the falling action is the other side as you're sliding down. And the falling action is everything's winding up. He's finally gotten to the end battle. He defeats the boss and he gets to the next level. He gets what he wants. And that's the falling action is you get to the peak of danger and then he works his way past it and succeeds. And so you have your falling action and, returning to a somewhat normal world after being in this world of adventure. And then at the bottom foot of the pyramid is the end or resolution. And that's going to be what happened after it. And if you think of the Sorcerer's Stone, it's, the stone is going to be destroyed. They saved it. Voldemort doesn't get to use it. Harry finishes up his first year. Now he's got to return back to his family for the summer. This is the end. It's like he's just been through this first year of this way, starting at the bottom, journeying to the pinnacle of saving the school, saving the world from Voldemort, and then basically re-entering school life to have to go back to live back on Privet Drive. And that's your end and resolution. So, if you think of it as a pyramid, is you start off slow and you're climbing. Your character needs to slog up that first hill to get to the point where he finally learns everything he needs to know to succeed and beat the challenge that's put in front of them. And then the bottom side is sliding down to the end where he is able to find a resolution and end of whatever challenge he has. And now he's ready to make the step into the new world, the next journey of whatever lays ahead of them now that they've beat whatever is in your story. And like if you're writing a series of stories, that's the next challenge. And you start off, if you think of Harry Potter is because that second year, now he's got a whole new set of problems. And it's the same thing over again, is him learning new things that help him conquer the next story and so on. And you can build these micro things into your story too. You can have lots of micro ups and downs through the story. And that's if you think about it, is each challenge that your character faces will be a microcosm of this pyramid of, in chapter 10, he's going to have to beat this challenge. So there's going to be, okay, I don't know what this is. And then he's going to figure out it, get to the where he figures out the challenge and beats it and then moves on with life. And you're going to slow the story pace down a little bit, let him adjust to what's new, and then ramp it up again to the next thing. That is how that works. And that's really putting all the elements of your story structure together to build the type of story that keeps people reading. Now that we've talked about all those different parts of story structure, let's put it all together into one whole review of what we covered, and you can see how it all fits together. So what we have in conclusion here is that story structure is important to readers so that they can identify the key points and themes of your stories that'll help them connect with your story, your characters, and their goals. You need to include your crucial story elements of setting, character, inciting incident, and your theme. So those are kind of your basic building blocks. And then once you have your building blocks, you need to expand upon what your setting and characters, inciting incident fit together. So you're going to use the SWBST strategy to come up with your story elements of somebody, who is your character, wanted, what do they want, B, but what's the problem or conflict they face, so how are they going to solve it, and then what happens at the end of the story. So just remember, somebody wanted, but so then. And that's how you're going to develop your story and your people. And that's just going to be the basics to get you started on putting together your story. And then once you have those, remember there's a basic plot structure that it's not set in stone. Nothing is ever set in stone with writing, but you want to have a beginning of your story, rising action to get through the middle and to the climax, and then you're going to have falling action as your character beats the challenge that you set for them and re-enters into a more normal life, to where you have your end of resolution as to what's going to happen now that you've completed this story. So that's good basic roundup of basic story structure. I hope that it's helpful. Please go out to the website, check out the material I have out there. It'll really help you put together what you want to set your story about. Thank you for joining me again on the podcast. And remember to check out my social media at Indie Writer Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Everything you want to know from this podcast and previous podcasts is on my website, independentwriterpodcast.com. And if you really enjoy the show and want to support the show, please check out my page on Patreon. It's Independent Writer Podcast out there. You can get a link to it from my website. And if you really want to support the show, thank you, and I'll talk to you again.